Good morning, everyone. I am Representative Steve Barrar, the chairman of the Veteran Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. I will now call this informational meeting to order and would ask everyone to please silence their cell phones and any other devices that make noises. There's always somebody that leaves them on. We'll figure out who that is soon, I'm sure. If we could, Commissioner, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. If we can start with, why don't we get the members and the members of the committee and also the staff committee to introduce themselves, starting down here.
Good morning, Torrin Ecker from the 193rd Adams in Cumberland County.
Jim Rigby, 71st, Cambria, Somerset County.
Zach Mako, Lehigh in Northampton, 183rd.
Frank Ryan, 101st, Lebanon County, Pennsylvania.
Airborne.
I'm John Hershey, and I wanted to welcome you guys all to the 82nd District. Not on the committee.
Mark Gillen, Southern Berks, and Northern Lancaster counties.
Sean Harris, Research Analyst for the committee.
Good morning. Rick O'Leary, Executive Director for Chairman Barrar.
Good morning. I'm Representative Chris Sinat. I'm the Democratic Chairman of the committee.
Mike Hillman, Democratic Executive Director.
Good morning. Joe Webster, District 150 in Montgomery County.
Good morning. Matt Gobler, 75th District, Elk and Clearfield counties.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning and traveling out here. I also want to mention that our General Ryan, I was driving up here this morning. I got about, 2.5 miles from here, and I saw General Ryan, Representative Ryan, walking from the Sheets for coffee back up to the firehouse. If you're not familiar with Representative Ryan, you walked across the United States how many times? Just once. You're planning a second trip, though, right? Okay. Well, when you get to the beach, call me. I'll meet you. Hey, we're here today to receive an update on the implementation of the FirstNet System, which provides priority communications for first responders across our Commonwealth. Our committee has been involved with this program since its inception, and Chairman Sinato and I thought it would be good for the committee members to be updated on the current implementation of the system. As well, we have 10 new members on the committee. Thus, this will be a greater learning experience for some of the new members on the committee. I want to thank all of our panelists, members, and staff, and those in the audience for being here today. As well, it's always great to return to the grounds of our State Fire Training Academy, and we thank Commissioner Trego and his staff for accommodating us today. We look forward to seeing your facility after the proceeding today. Chairman Sinato, any remarks?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman Barrar. I, too, want to echo the Chairman's remarks, and I mean, this is our annual trip here, and it's always so nice to see what's happening at the Fire Academy. We've had some very good hearings here, and the great work that's being done here at the Academy, so we appreciate all the efforts that's going on here, Commissioner, and your troops, and thank you, and look forward to the testimony today.
Great. Commissioner Trego, would you like to give some opening remarks?
They know me in microphones. Can you hear me all right? Okay. Good morning and welcome to the State Fire Academy. Gentlemen, representatives and senators, thank you very much, and to our committee, thank you for coming, and you're welcome here annually. And Sean reminded me that the fire commissioner never attends these because he's out of state. So I don't know what happened this time, but it's I'm happy to be here. And Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. Obviously, you saw when you come in, there's a lot of construction going on. They're repaving the entrance on the other side of our admin building. And again, you're obviously more than welcome afterwards to take a tour of the facility. But I just wanted to warn you, there is a lot of activity. So restrooms are out immediately to your left, should you need them. We also, in the case of emergency, should an alarm sound, please exit this building and go up in front of the admin building. Normally we go out back, but it's being paved, so but we'll see that. Hopefully we don't have to come across that. So once again, welcome, thank you. I'd like to take the opportunity, if I could. You see all these fine young men in the back here are students here at the resident program that is going on this week. The gentleman with the tie is Tom Cook, our administrator here. Beside him is Tim Archer, one of the resident instructors, and the other gentleman standing is Tom Leiter, another one of our resident instructors. The rest are students here, so you might get a chance to see them in performing here this afternoon and if or later on today. So once again, welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. Anything we can do or the staff can do, please let us know. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I was able to, when I got here, Commissioner, the first thing I was able to do was to get on the internet. I think most of us, I don't know if everybody brought computers, I did. But if there's a way to get on the internet here, if you want to maybe write it on the board so other members that will be here for the next couple hours have a chance to get onto the internet here. Speaking of the internet, that's why we're here today. So also to the students out there, we're the Veteran Affairs Emergency Preparedness Committee. So what we do in this committee, a lot of what we do, we first of all, the Veteran Affairs part is easy to figure out what we do there. We do pass legislation to try to help our veteran community, if any of you are veterans, but also our committee, we work with the professional firefighters, the volunteer firefighters, PEMA, the National Guard, who are some of the other agencies we work with, the Ambulance Association. We have the SR6 probably in our first week back in September, and our first and second week back in September, we will be passing a bunch of the recommendations, if you're familiar with the SR6 Commission. It was a 2-year process, looked into recruiting and retention of firefighters into the ranks of the volunteers and things we could do to try to make your life better and to keep you as a volunteer firefighter. If you're currently, I don't know if there's any professional firefighters in the ranks there, if you're all volunteers, but SR6 has been a huge undertaking, and we will be moving quite a few bills come early part of September. So hopefully if you'll pay attention to some of the stuff that'll be coming your way. So, but at this time, I'd like to call up our first panelist, who is Mr. Dave Kerr, Vice President of External Affairs for AT&T, and Mr. Rob Walls, FirstNet Manager with AT&T. And we'll start by saying we did have a commitment from the state police to be here today. Unfortunately, they had to cancel at the last minute, and we weren't able to replace anybody from the state police to be here, but it would have been great to have them here with us. But guys can begin your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you. Chairman Barrar, Chairman Sonato, members of the committee, staff, and Commissioner, thanks for hosting us here today. And obviously the students in the back, thank you for your commitment to volunteerism and firefighting. As Chairman Barrar mentioned, with me today is Rob Walls. Rob Walls is a Montgomery Countyan. He's served as a volunteer firefighter as well, and rescue diver. Your company's Spring Mill in the Conshohocken area in West Conshohocken. So we'll hear from Rob in a minute here. And it's an honor to be with you all today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to this point, or to the point where Pennsylvania opted in and committed to the FirstNet effort. I'll talk a little bit about what the FirstNet effort is, and then Rob's going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the marketplace, implementation of FirstNet, and obviously we'll stand for questions. As Chairman Barrar noted, this committee held a hearing on FirstNet in October of 2017. Can't believe it's been almost 2 years ago already, where the committee heard testimony. And for the new members, I'll dial back and talk a little bit more about FirstNet in a moment. But at the hearing on October 2017, heard testimony from us and from others. And then about a month later, under the leadership of Major Diane Stackhouse of the State Police, Governor Wolf did take the step to opt into the FirstNet effort. So FirstNet, for public safety, really anybody in public safety knows communication is key. In times of an emergency, really a surplus of cell phone activity can cause the traditional commercial networks to hit capacity. People understandably in that situation rush to get in touch with friends and loved ones, while police and fire and EMS and other work diligently to the response efforts. So we've all seen it in a situation like that. I think it was really amplified by the tragic events of September 11th and further amplified by Hurricane Katrina. And it demonstrated the limits really of regular commercial networks and their ability to manage the surge in traffic. On our AT&T network, on the commercial side of it, talk about the growth in our network of about 470,000% the last decade of data. So I think some of you have heard me mention that before in other areas, and it's just, you know, astronomical when you think about it. Pick one of your favorite highways where there's traffic backups in your district, and think about a 470,000% growth. But that's what we're seeing, whether it's streaming, whether it's activities like that on the commercial side. So prior to FirstNet, that was an issue for public safety to compete with that. So, you know, those who work in the public safety recognize this, and FirstNet Authority was really created as a recommendation initially of the 9/11 Commission. It was one of the last recommendations put in place, and federal law created something called the FirstNet Authority, which is a true public-private partnership housed initially in the U.S. Department of Commerce, but made and advised by true first responders, police, fire, and EMS. So that authority did an extensive outreach here in Pennsylvania throughout the early part of this decade. And then in the 2016-2017 timeframe, did a major request for proposal, an RFP, if you will, for a 25-year federal contract, one of the largest federal contracts ever created. AT&T was a bidder for that, and I'm thankful to say was successful in getting that contract. One piece of that was a role for the states, very much a states' rights advocacy at Congress to every state and the 6 territories that are a part of the country had an opportunity to either opt in or opt out of the FirstNet effort. So opting out didn't mean that you couldn't participate. It meant that the state had to build and maintain their own network. So that was discussed, for the new members, that was discussed at length back in October of 2017. So as I mentioned, shortly after that, the state did opt in, and Governor Wolf opted in to FirstNet. So really, FirstNet helps save time in the field and the ability to make decisions quickly and marshal resources and coordinate action directly transfers into lives saved. And that's why it's important to continue to expand access to this dedicated, highly secure, and reliable platform. Another important aspect of the FirstNet effort is interoperability. Public safety officials know firsthand that emergencies are not typically confined to boundaries, and they recognize that incident response can cross jurisdictions and involve neighboring authorities. So FirstNet recognizes that, and the platform is designed to be interoperable. So I'm proud to say we've made some good progress and adoption since the launch in 2017. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob now to talk a little bit more about FirstNet and the work that he's been doing.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to talk about building the network and how this network is so relevant to our first responders and emergency management and the communities that they support. But before I do, I want to make a special thank you to all the fellow firefighters, students, and instructors in the room today. Thank you all for your service. Thank you for your commitment to public safety. As Dave alluded, I'm one of the team of 8 that supports the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the state of Delaware. Our goal is to create awareness and drive adoption around FirstNet and the network that we can provide to public safety today. Governor Wolf announced his decision to opt into FirstNet in November 2017, and since then, we haven't stopped working to build out this network for Pennsylvania and the nation. We invested more than $775 million in our Pennsylvania wireless and wired networks during the periods of 2016 to 2018, $775 million. Our goal is to boost reliability, expand the coverage, provide greater speeds, and overall performance of our network for residents and businesses. And of course, these investments also provide critical services that support public safety and first responders using the FirstNet communication platform. Building upon our current and planned investments in Pennsylvania, we continue to extend the reach and increase the capacity of the FirstNet communication platform. One element that's so critical to FirstNet is Band 14. This is spectrum that the FCC has dedicated to public safety, and spectrum that we're currently deploying on top of AT&T's existing spectrum. The reason this is so important to first responders is that they have dedicated spectrum on top of, and they have priority over all of AT&T's network to provide the best communications when communications may be limited or unavailable or on an everyday basis. So Band 14 is high-quality spectrum provided by the FirstNet Authority. Its signal covers larger geographic areas with less infrastructure to better support rural communities. And it can better reach in-building in more urban areas as compared to higher megahertz spectrum. We're proud to report that the number of markets with the FirstNet Band 14 spectrum is over 650 markets nationwide, including here in Pennsylvania. We're moving quickly with about 65% of our nationwide coverage targets completed well ahead of schedule. The more we roll out Band 14 across the country, the more we're able to provide first responders with truly dedicated coverage and capacity when they need it, again, on an everyday basis and when those emergencies or incidents should occur. This helps them reliably connect to critical information, communicate, and coordinate effectively. We are also proceeding a space with our plan to add new sites that are included in the FirstNet State Plan, which was developed over multiple years in consultation with the state public safety leaders, including State Police Major Diane Stackhouse and her team. Those new sites will be constructed in many areas where coverage needs were greatest. We recently turned on a new site in Heiner, PA in Clinton County, and more will be constructed over the next 3 years as outlined in the state plan. It's important to note that we must follow the same rules and processes for constructing new sites included in the state plan as we would for any other new cell site. We adhere to all local, state, and national rules governing construction of new sites, which typically can take 12 to 18 months to complete. But keep in mind, this is a priority for us. Public safety personnel across the country continue to turn to FirstNet to advocate the routine and emergency responses. Nationwide, nearly 9,000 public safety agencies and organizations have subscribed to FirstNet, accounting for over 750,000 subscribers or connections that are in service today. We continue to work to grow those numbers nationally and specifically throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Chester County was the first in Pennsylvania to subscribe to the National First Responder Network. As a result, its police, fire, and EMS responders will be able to connect to the critical infrastructure or critical information they need more quickly and easily, even during times of major regional events when mobile networks are congested. One example that we like to bring up, especially for those in southeastern PA, is an example that we use from the Eagles Super Bowl parade, when some approximation around 2 million people were gathering to celebrate in the festivities. We noticed that the networks could be congested. We saw that there was a lot of success where FirstNet was able to communicate throughout the course of the events and provide reliable communications for those that were testing and those who were using the network. When there is a disaster, we know resiliency is not a siloed effort. An emergency response often relies on its community. That is why FirstNet is not just limited to first responders. We also look at those organizations that support our first responders to make them eligible in what we refer to as the extended primary communities. And this can be entities such as school safety, healthcare, utility operations, transportation services, all of which might be called upon to support the efforts of our first responders depending on the incident. They are also able to subscribe to the FirstNet platform so that they can be better equipped when called upon to support response efforts. Another example of that very specifically is a company local to Pennsylvania that is involved in storm remediation. Asplund, as a tree cutting service, responds in efforts with our utility companies to restore power when power has been affected. They selected FirstNet and are using FirstNet because they recognize this provides greater reliability, security, and connectivity every day and when those incidents occur. Data traffic for FirstNet primary users will always have that priority that we mentioned and preemption capabilities as part of the FirstNet subscription. And in an emergency, first responders can extend priority and preemption to extended primary users, where we can uplift the wireless service for the duration of the emergency. Now, part of the deliverable to FirstNet the Authority was where AT&T or FirstNet built with AT&T is mandated to provide deployables and other network resources when network might be limited or unavailable. Public safety agencies subscribed to FirstNet have 24/7 access to this nationwide fleet of 75 deployables. These are network assets that can either be deployed for planned events or called upon in emergencies to help our first responders communicate effectively when they need it most. And to take that a step further, we deploy in conjunction with public safety entities as they request these deployables. In addition to the 75 FirstNet deployables, and might I add, the deployables are satellite cell site on light trucks. These are, I sometimes get ahead of myself and forget to explain what a deployable is. But imagine a 26,000-pound vehicle that shows up, can throw up a satellite dish, throw up a mast, and is essentially a portable cell site. This is extremely helpful when we look at situations where rescue operations are in very remote areas, or we look at situations that we need to increase capacity for public safety. But FirstNet subscribers are also able to tap into the 300-plus network assets from the AT&T network disaster recovery operations. We are committed to providing reliable communications before, during, and after a storm, disaster, or any incident that we should face. With nearly 30 years of experience responding to large-scale events, AT&T has proven time and time again that we are ready and prepared to restore and maintain service if and when that disaster strikes. To strengthen public safety's command and control of the network, we also launched the FirstNet Response Operations Program. This program is dedicated to the FirstNet subscribers and is aligned with Homeland Security's National Incident Management System. The FirstNet Response Operations Program, led by former first responders, guides the deployment of the FirstNet deployable assets based on the needs of public safety. And we can coordinate across federal, state, local, and tribal agencies with a focus on life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. Since establishing the FirstNet Response Operations Program a year ago, public safety has turned to FirstNet to help support them during both planned and emergency events. This year alone, we have helped first responders stay connected during nearly 75 emergency events, from wildfires and floods to tropical storms turned hurricanes and tornadoes to search and rescue missions in remote locations and more. FirstNet has been there and is committed to be there in the future. Plus, we've supported agencies at more than 100 planned events this year, including coast-to-coast 4th of July celebrations. First responders have also relied on FirstNet during music festivals, sporting events, and speaker rallies for public officials. In addition, as part of the program, FirstNet will supply dedicated liaisons trained in incident response to provide 24/7 support to the state and local EOCs as they activate. Liaisons serve as the primary link between public safety and the FirstNet resource, coordinating across federal, state, local, and tribal agencies. The close integration with public safety and the EOCs will enable the FirstNet team at AT&T to better solve first responders' communications challenges. Whether via deploying network assets or expediting network restoration, we are committed to maintain communications for our first responders. This will give public safety agencies who subscribe to FirstNet a level of support during emergencies that's far beyond anything they've ever seen. Consider the response to Hurricane Michael. And just a quick overview, Hurricane Michael hit the Panhandle across Florida into in Georgia this past fall. FirstNet was put to the test, maintaining critical communications and connectivity and allowing national, state, and local public safety agencies to access the information they needed throughout the relief efforts. In addition to the dedicated network platform, the FirstNet team deployed mobile units to shore up network resilience in hard-hit areas that would have otherwise suffered from outages and gaps in connectivity. The deployables that we mentioned, satellite, cell, and light trucks, made their way to places such as Seminole County in Florida to connect National Guard personnel, State Patrol, trauma care, police, fire, and rescue teams. The first few hours after a severe storm are critical, and FirstNet helps get the right people connected when seconds matter the most. Shifting gears, and another deliverable which we have to First Responder Network Authority, our app ecosystem, our application ecosystem. To help spur public safety specific innovation, FirstNet at AT&T team sought direct input from the emergency services professionals to create an application ecosystem, the app catalog. And these are public safety applications that we utilize to better serve the needs and communication requirements of our public safety, emergency management, first responders, and those that support them. The app catalog gives first responders a place to find new solutions that are purpose-built and tested according to their needs. FirstNet is innovative, and we're incredibly excited to keep building out this platform's capability and the offerings associated. We have worked with developers, we've hosted hackathons, and with the rise of the Internet of Things and smart cities, it means that the future of public safety will be increasingly connected. We're leveraging the technology that's available today and incorporating that into the needs that first responders are looking at, whether it's sensors in vehicles, infrastructures, drones, or gear that have potential to help detect, assess, and target response efforts more effectively. We're utilizing this technology with priority services over our network to maintain those connections when it's needed. We are committed to exploring ways that these and future technology solutions can be deployed to help save lives. We look forward to continue to work with each of you and the local, state, and federal authorities to provide innovative public safety assets and solutions and to maximize the presence of FirstNet to benefit Pennsylvania's finest, our first responders and the communities they serve.
And we're available for questions.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Representative Hershey, I think you wanted to go first. Yeah. With a question? Or about your district? We always extend a courtesy since it's your district and we're just subjects of yours right now.
Right. Yeah, so I just wanted to welcome you guys all to my district. Those of you who don't know, I represent Juniata, Mifflin, and a little bit of Franklin County. So this is the northwestern end of my district and stretches down all the way to the Chambersburg area. So it's a pretty big geographic area. Lewistown is the population center of my district.
Right.
So some of you from southeastern areas might be a little jealous of the rural way of life we have here, but I'm very proud of it, and it's a wonderful place to call home. So thank you guys for coming out today. When's rush hour? Rush hour, well, with the PennDOT traffic right now, with the bridges closed, it's pretty much all the time.
Great, thank you. Dave, I want to applaud you for your construction of the new towers that you've built, but you've also used some of the existing state police towers in your build-out?
We have, in the discussions with state police, and even really, frankly, prior to the the FirstNet effort really taking hold, even moving back a decade, State Police has shared with us and all the wireless carriers, honestly, their infrastructure, and the state has as well. I mean, I know you've been debating some inventory legislation as a House and the Senate as well. The industry is generally aware of where those state assets are, and when we can use them, we will use them. They're not always able to be used, shall we say, given that we and everyone in the industry builds a commercial network that needs to be 99.9999% reliable. So, for example, some of those sites could be a wooden telephone pole that just doesn't have the height. But generally, yes, we've been aware of the state police assets that are out there and do use them on occasion when we can.
Have they I know there is money in this year's budget for a new radio system. Is that anything that FirstNet is involved in with them?
The FirstNet effort is really an augmentation. The FirstNet is basically your wireless and cellular device. So it's related slightly, but the radio network is not. That's a whole separate effort, and I know that State Police has been making great progress on that across the state and came to all of you as part of the budget. But they work hand in hand. Rob, I don't know if you want to.
I think what we're afraid of, we're all afraid of what happened with the last implementation of a radio system that was, turned into an incredible debacle. And I know when we heard there's another radio system being built, we were all kind of nervous because of what happened.
Well, and frankly, Mr. Chairman, and those new members that may not have been here for the hearing back in October, that was a point we made very clearly in our case that we made to select AT&T because and opt into the FirstNet system because we take all the risk. We are building this network. We have strict requirements to the federal government, and we're going to meet those requirements. And if we don't, then we're severely penalized. So the risk to the state to build the FirstNet is really non-existent. It's all upon us to do it.
The other hearings that we've been having, I don't know if you're involved in them, the hearings on the expanding internet broadband into our rural communities. Is FirstNet is that something that we're going to be able to build on top of with FirstNet and then help us to bring better internet broadband into the extremely rural areas of Pennsylvania? Sure, I'm well aware of the discussions ongoing on rural broadband, and we're happy to be a part of those discussions. And I know Representative Hershey can probably point out a couple sites in his district right near here that lack broadband or lack wireless coverage. But FirstNet is a vehicle potentially. I mean, let's be very clear. FirstNet is first and foremost for public safety. But as part of the state plan, and Rob mentioned this, we heard loud and clear throughout the process, even before AT&T was selected, the administration and all of you here, that issues about coverage. So that was addressed in part in the state plan and AT&T's commitment to build out in the state plan. In addition, I think this is a very important point, in addition to our regular build plan, but we did commit to build out infrastructure and coverage in the state plan above and beyond what we normally would. So when a new site goes in a rural area as part of FirstNet, obviously, we provide that band 14 that Rob talked about and spectrum for public safety, but it's also available commercially for AT&T customers as well to use. So it's a partial, not really a solution, but a partial way to deal with the rural broadband issue. Yes. And if I remember right, I think you were involved in the sending your deployables. Well, I'm sure that some people like to send their deplorables, but they're deployables to Puerto Rico after the hurricane there. Can you maybe give us a little bit about that? All right.
Defining a deployable is very critical here. In 2017, we experienced several very severe hurricanes. Hurricane Maria and Irma had heavy impacts on Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as parts of southern U.S. The Pennsylvania National Guard was deployed to Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Prior to their deployment, we worked with the Pennsylvania National Guard to provide FirstNet services so they could experience FirstNet in those situations. And although our network was not available in all parts of the locations they were going to, they noticed when they were in location where communication was available, they had that priority over the commercial traffic. We also, in process, were using naval ships and other means of transportation to get satellite Colts or satellite cell site on light trucks in positions with first responders who were responding in the Puerto Rico events and the U.S. Virgin Islands. That is a commitment that we have to public safety, to FirstNet the authority, and that was a real good test for us in 2017.
Great, thank you, and we thank you for your participation in that also. Chairman Sonato, any questions?
Thank you, Jim Roth. Dave and Laura Williams. I want to commend both of you for your testimony today, but I know that. Oh, I'm sorry. I know that when we had these hearings, and it's been a long process, and I think it's so critical for public safety for what we're looking at. And I know that the efforts that AT&T put into it, and I think as we all agree, especially this committee, our number one priority is public safety for our police, fire, EMS, and everybody. And we've come a long way, I believe, over the years since we first started with all the issues of no one being able to communicate with each other. And we have a ways to go, but I think with FirstNet, I think it's going to come a long way. So I did want to make that point and just thank you for all your efforts, because I know it wasn't an easy process. Thank you.
Great, okay. Going out to the members for questions. If you have questions, let me know as soon as you can. First question from Representative Gillen.
I want to thank you, deplorables. I mean, you gentlemen, for being here. Dave, Rob, thank you very much for coming. I'm glad my daughters are as interesting as
One of
this
my
has
favorite
been.
deplorables.
As interesting as it's been for them, I think that was the line that they're probably going to remember. I think you've touched on this in terms of the durability of the system as perhaps maybe also challenged by an overt or a covert belligerent out there, whether it be natural or man-induced electromagnetic pulse. Could you just kind of cover the panorama of solar, corona, lightning? What could, well, I mean, you don't have to touch on every single one, whether it be meteor, hacking. What are we looking at on the horizon here, which could challenge the system currently or in the future?
That is a very, very difficult question to answer, but I'll give it my best. And I think you mentioned EMP, or electromagnetic pulse. We're still, from a network perspective, all carriers are looking at ways to maintain communications with adverse effects that could take place. That is an area that some items we've only dealt with from a hypothetical standpoint, and we're planning how would we respond. In some areas, we've seen how potential terrorist attacks could impact a network. The bottom line is that we are putting ourselves in a situation that we can best respond to those events, and we do have a deliverable from network connectivity to provide one of our deployables within a 14-hour period. And in most situations, we're able to deploy much quicker than that. But that is a commitment we have to public safety. But to your question about EMP, certain items we're still going to deal with in the future as they come about. Hopefully, we're never going to be impacted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in that regards. But it's something that all carriers are looking at emergency management plans on how we can deal with those situations.
Thank you.
Representative Ryan.
Great job today. I have a couple of, I think, fairly routine questions, so I'll kind of hit them all and then however you want to do it. Whenever you did this system, was a continuity of operations test done to ensure that the agencies that might be interoperable at the federal level and other agencies were in fact able to connect into the system, and did they have any types of those kinds of concerns?
Yes. So one of the elements behind First Responder Network Authority is that this organization was solely created in 2012 to create this national public safety broadband network. Many of the individuals within First Responder Network Authority have years of great public safety experience, including Commissioner Ross of the City of Philadelphia Police, who sits as a board member. Throughout 2012 to 2017, First Responder Network Authority interviewed thousands of public safety officials and asked about the requirements necessary for this network. During that period, they detailed exactly what they needed, which was then put into an RFP, which AT&T responded to.
Right, and I was familiar with that, but did you find that the other agencies, and I'll give you a perfect example. After September 11th, I was on active duty, and we had people who were away at different locations, and we tried to get key personnel back. And we found that because of the reliability of the cell phone system, I happen to have been in Atlanta, Georgia, and was trying to get back to Quantico to deploy overseas. And we were finding it took days to be able to get in touch with people, which is what triggered some of the need for this network. And so in the CONUP testing, which is, for those not familiar in the audience, it's a continuity of operations plan. If the Pentagon were to become hit, there's an off-site location where people go. And have you tested that aspect of the system to make sure that, one, getting key personnel back who might need to have access to the system as well, because if they're trying to rely on data access, might find it problematic. And so you might have, as an example, second in charge would end up becoming in command. And when the answer you just gave also implies that there is a network administrator who's managing the traffic, as an example, with an air traffic control system. With the FAA, Leesburg is the network administrator for the process, so that if it becomes overloaded, people can start shutting down key nodes. So have you done that level of testing? Because if we're doing it Pennsylvania only and we don't do it as a national test, we might have some operational seams for which there could become a problem at a time when we need it the most. And that's actually the thrust of my question.
Okay. And this is nationwide, including the territories in the District of Columbia.
Okay.
So from an interoperability standpoint, or have we tested this across multi-jurisdictions? Yes. This past year, we had over 200 planned and unplanned emergency events that we were using FirstNet to provide communications across multiple jurisdictions. So, and that spanned from the wildfires of California, where multiple public safety agencies were responding to events, to the hurricane response of Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Florence, where multiple public safety organizations were coming in and working in response to those efforts.
And then the last question, in those tests that you had, that were the real-life emergencies, whatever the case may be, were there any operational risk assessments where you said, you know what, we need to tweak this? In my world, we would call it a control deficiency, a significant deficiency, or a material weakness. The material weakness being the most serious one that would have to be resolved. Anything that would be able to be shared that might not compromise the network while you're fixing it?
Well, one deficiency is when agencies show up and they're not using FirstNet. They might be on a situation of their best effort from their commercial carrier. But we do learn from every planned event or unplanned event that we deal with. To look at two hurricanes and say that they're the same is not true. Hurricane Florence brought so much flooding that impacted the land mobile radio networks in the area, in which one of North Carolina's public safety directors in Whiteville, North Carolina, turned to FirstNet to utilize our enhanced push-to-talk communication. Hurricane Michael in Florida, which we spoke about, had a much faster moving storm. It came through and it had a heavy impact on infrastructure, but it did not linger and bring the same amount of flooding that we saw with Hurricane Florence. With each event that we face, we're learning how to respond, how to communicate with those public safety agencies. And another key point is we work with the EOCs that are activated to deploy our network assets in response to where their public safety individuals are responding.
Outstanding, great effort, and thank you both very, very much for your information. Very helpful.
Great, thank you, Representative Bryan. Also, I wanted to announce that we've been joined by Representative Dan Williams down here on the end. Dan, what county?
Chester County.
so I'm late, but this is a hard place to find.
Yeah. Get used to it. We come here every year, so after this year, you'll be a veteran at it, you know? Next person for question, Representative Ecker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony this morning. Being one of the new members on the committee, I have just a few brief fundamental questions. So currently, where is this being employed in Pennsylvania? Is it just Chester County and Clinton County, or is there kind of where it's at or where it's being used currently?
Great question, and this is nationwide. Sure. The FirstNet is available throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we're working with public safety entities, fire, law enforcement, EMS, and the extended primary communities that we discussed that are taking advantage, that are utilizing the service today. So it's not limited to any specific area, and that's one of the elements that makes this unique. This is nationwide, including the territories and the District of Columbia.
One other point I want to make, Representative Ecker, too, is when this was debated in Congress and the federal law, it was debated and decided that this is not a mandate. So in other words, this is not the federal government coming in and demanding that all police, fire, EMS use a FirstNet system. So this is localities still have the opportunity to opt into FirstNet or continue or choose another service, if you will, another carrier for the service. So I want to be very clear on that too, that our team has to go out and talk about the benefits of FirstNet, and we're across the state in all corners of the state, and certainly can talk a little bit to you afterwards about in your district. If you
Sure, and because this is obviously in Adams County is much like this area, Rolling Hills, and people lose service on the drop of the dime. And I know I've met with some of our local fire and EMS. Especially EMS, and that lose service very quickly running, calls. So how do, maybe this is just a follow-up question, do you find that this is mostly municipality driven or is it county driven? How do people typically contract services for these things?
I'll let Rob jump in here, but as you, I'm sure know, we have more volunteer fire departments in Pennsylvania than any other state, so we're very much a local state. Obviously, there are large city professional fire departments, for example, and police that we work with, but I'll turn it over to Rob.
Sure. So one thing I want to point out is that I have 7 counterparts that we spend time working presentations in front of EMS, fire, law enforcement. We work to create awareness that this is available. And so throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's 8 of us that really, our sole purpose is to create awareness. And we ask that we try to set meetings with local fire companies, local police and law enforcement to let them know that this is available. The other fundamental piece is that we're asking for feedback. Where is coverage limited? And that's information that we take up the chain because part of our goal is to provide FirstNet services anywhere that public safety is responding to.
And just one last question. I think the chairman kind of touched on this, but as far as the infrastructure is concerned for someone that would opt into this service, is that a financial burden or is it basically they have cell phones that work, then they sign up for the service and those phones work? I mean, is there a financial upstart to this?
So there's a couple ways to do this. There's what's called like an agency-paid approach, and then there's what's called a subscriber-paid approach for your service. But I'll let Rob talk maybe a little bit more about kind of pricing.
Because of the federal program, we had to be very aggressive in costs, and that was part of the feedback we heard from first responder network authorities 2012 to 2017. We knew this had to be aggressively positioned. Just to give you an idea, a firefighter that walks into a store is able to purchase services at the same price that the Pennsylvania State Police would be able to purchase services for. So it is very competitively priced.
And I will mention too, this is a dynamic marketplace. Our competitors are responding as well, and that's good public policy, right? I mean, that's what you're all interested in and supporting public safety.
Great, thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dave and Rob, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate that. Yeah, Torrin just kind of touched on my question as far as the National Guard and how this is available to the National Guard. And I guess to a prior deployment, I was not being rude. I was texting some of my buddies that were actually down in Puerto Rico. They were the Chinooks in Puerto Rico. And one of my buddies was telling me how he had cell service. Now, this was T-Mobile, so, I mean, competitor, but T-Mobile on the east side of the island, and then on the west side he had, for some reason he has a sat phone, but he had a sat phone and that was working. So I was just wondering, I guess the band 14 on the 700 megahertz, that's a cell phone frequency? Is that correct? Okay, just making sure.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how that ties into the National Guard and how that can become available to the National Guard before we roll out, and how we would use that as someone like myself, if I was called to go to Puerto Rico to help out, how we can do that. Because I know the TAG has made that clear, just listening to him, that he wants, and as Pennsylvania National Guardsmen, we are on the forefront of one of the best National Guards in the state, in the country. So trying to make his vision come true and have that interoperability, how would we do that in the National Guard?
Okay, guys. Great question, too. So Band 14 is one component, and that's the FCC had declared that Band 14 was sanctioned for public safety, and that was a series of spectrum that was given to FirstNet Responder Network Authority in 2012. AT&T, or FirstNet built with AT&T, is deploying Band 14. We actually have to touch our towers and upgrade the equipment to deploy Band 14. So one of the elements that we offer is that we provide priority over all of AT&T's spectrum, which is 167 megahertz of spectrum, more than any other carrier in the marketplace. So as we're deploying Band 14, FirstNet subscribers can utilize all of AT&T's infrastructure with priority over that commercial traffic. But it's a process. We are ahead of schedule, but we have a 5-year plan to deploy Band 14, and that's according to the state plan portal.
May I have a follow-up? So my follow-up question would be then, so then you do have to have AT&T as your carrier to tap into the Band 14?
That is a good question, because FirstNet is actually its own separate unique carrier, built with AT&T. We utilize AT&T's infrastructure, but FirstNet is a separate carrier with a separate unique physical core. We utilize AT&T's infrastructure, but FirstNet is the carrier at play here.
Okay. So like you were saying, going back to the agency or the subscription, you'd have to have an agency or subscription for that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Representative Mako. Representative Rigby.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Two-part question. I think you might have answered the second part already. In the event of an emergency or a disaster, who does the dispatch or the call to have your deployable service truck come and set up? And the second part of that would be, and I think you said about 14 hours, the turnaround time to have that vehicle in place. Thank you.
Sure. You want me to hit that? So with each agency that we work with, they have each public safety agency, law enforcement, fire, EMS, or federal, they have the capability to request one of the satellite Colts or deployables. One of the key elements here is our RAN team, our radio access network team, evaluates our network at the time of the request and determines whether or not our network can provide ample coverage. If it's determined that we need to provide additional capacity and coverage, we release and issue the deployable. So it is managed by the local public safety agency, that, and whether it's a county, a municipality, or local fire company, they have the access to request these deployables.
If I can just follow up, so I guess would it be in the case of a fire department, the chief, is there a person, you just don't want anybody calling and
Correct.
to say, so I guess I know through NIMS we had to go through emergencies and who the chain of command was, and is it similar to that?
Well, the public safety agency will determine who's going to be the administrator on the account.
Right. And
As a firefighter myself, I wouldn't want to be the one making that call, but I would want to make sure that there's officers that understand the process to make the requests. Many times when we're making those requests, it's based on a planned event or an emergency that's taking place where we find ourselves in situations where coverage is not available. You also asked about the 14-hour response time. That response time is what was mandated that we can provide access to within 14 hours. We many times are finding it much quicker than that, but by federal mandate, that's what we have to abide by.
Representative Gobler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the testimony. Some of my questions have been answered by some of the questions that have come up, but just to make sure that I understand. So what does it look like if, how is subscription made available? I guess it seems pretty cut and dry if you're talking about a full-time public safety individual, but for somebody like National Guard or a volunteer firefighter, would it be available to them to have their actual regular personal cell phone be a FirstNet subscription, or maybe is this how the associate or whatever you call it, the secondary subscription? Can you explain how that works?
Sure,
Because I'm
sure.
a National Guardsman myself, but also working with a lot of volunteer firefighters. I'm kind of trying to understand in my own mind how we prioritize public safety without getting that net so wide that we've got too many subscribers to make the priority worthwhile. So I'm just trying to understand how that works.
Absolutely. And thank you for your commitment to public safety and your service. It's very important that we maintain the integrity of this network. And because of that, we have to go through the proper procedures. We have a federal background check that we have to that we have to implement using Sheer ID. This does not require anything more than the individual firefighter, police officer, National Guardsman to present their credentials that we enter in to determine that they meet that criteria. With that, we also have to put a commanding officer in place. So of the individual, they have to provide that information to us. So when an individual subscriber walks in to purchase services, they can do so by presenting their credentials, and we go through the proper mechanism to provide that. Again, you pointed out something very important here. Priority is critical here, and we need to make sure that it's only available to those that are the first responders and the extended primary communities that are supporting those.
That's very helpful. And then can you give any information about how many in Pennsylvania, ballpark, I guess, are you seeing a large number of volunteer individual personal subscribers that are showing interest, or are you seeing mainly agency subscriptions at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Pennsylvania's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is the fourth largest state by adoption of FirstNet. So that's broken down by entities in healthcare and utility organizations, firefighter, law enforcement, and EMS. I've got to be careful about sharing too much information on that, but we know that we are the fourth largest state by adoption, and there's over 750,000 subscribers nationwide utilizing FirstNet today. The breakdown, I think you're looking at more of a detail on how many fire. It's hard to put that information out there, but.
And no, actually, what I was looking for was just kind of an understanding of kind of how, and that's what you provided, just how individual subscribers versus agencies really kind of how this is getting implemented out there. So that gives me the flavor of my question. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
It's a good mix, Representative Gobler, large, small, agency, individual, and some of the secondary ones, healthcare, that we talked about. So.
Great, thank you. Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've already sort of painted a good picture through the other Q&A parts, but, and I'm not a big techie guy, but I wanted to see a picture, so I got the idea that we've got a cell phone network, we've got some deployable satellite capability. We even mentioned land mobile radios, which I would have considered absolutely obsolete in other, I know military officers are still walking around with them, and they put them on the ground and take out their cell phone to communicate, and that's what they do. Can you draw for me a little bit of a picture, not as a big techie, but of the platform itself? Like, if are there emergency response kits that if I show up and my agency's involved, but I'm not a subscriber, what is the platform? What is your software? All the way down to the apps. Is it like an Apple App Store kind of a thing, or how do you do that? So a whole bunch of questions, but I just want to get because unfortunately, since this is my first time here, I don't have that part of the background.
I'm always very willing to answer from another Montgomery Countyan. So, great question. What we are talking about is the network itself. FirstNet is a network, a cellular network that's built for public safety. But there are other areas that we're focused on. The application catalog. We have situational awareness applications that we vetted to make that we know that public safety is looking for, whether it's law enforcement, fire, or a FEMA organization. There's many different scenarios that we've been involved with where we responded to emergency events and we literally handed out phones because we knew that we could provide the network when other networks may have been impacted. That's not something that we often advertise because we do want the first responders utilizing the network itself. But we have built kits, emergency drop kits, that provide coverage, that provide satellite capabilities into a local network that can be utilized in a search and rescue mission. There's different technologies, whether it's hardware and or software, that we're utilizing that are helping public safety communicate in situations where they previously would not have been able to communicate. I usually take about 30 minutes to go into the next round to explain the drop kits that we just mentioned, but there are technologies that we're working with that are more than just your cell phone because it's a network that's built for public safety.
So I can imagine in a use case, and I'm just making something up, if I were a first responder and I came upon an incident and turned around going, I need a dog, is that an example of an app that might be in here somewhere that I could say, where's the closest dog team, and somebody else is on that app to say, hey, we're 6 blocks away, but we're coming to you. I'm just trying to figure out what kind of apps are people developing to throw into this.
That might go back to our suggestion box where we need a canine informational tool.
Well, I was trying to think. I'm not an emergency response guy, so I'm just thinking off the top of my head of so that example's coming out of maybe Washington D.C. a presidential inauguration, where, in my experience, you would have military police augmenting in different places, and I come out of the subway and look around and go, there's a disturbance, I need 6 guys. Where are the closest 6 guys?
I think that's the beauty of it is people smarter than us and more tech savvy than us are out there developing these types of things. And I think it's also important and worth noting that, it's not just, coverage, which we've talked a little bit about today, but it's capacity, and it's things like 5G and the Internet of Things that are out there, and the need to really have infrastructure in place to even enhance capacity. Something we were working on called small cell, small infrastructure, and Representative Ferry has some legislation. I've talked to him about that too, and that's important as well. We don't know what the next, it certainly is in the interest of public safety to have immediate information when that ambulance is rolling, whenever that police car is rolling, to know what they're getting into, and that is developing, and the technology has got to keep up with that, and the infrastructure has to keep up with that as well.
Okay, so I think you answered my question, but let me postulate some more. If I could see a scenario, right? I'm a subscriber, I'm in. If I'm only using email, if I go in and I copy 6 guys on a question on my first response, and they copy 6 more, and by the time I look at it, I've got 53 emails that all have the same subject line. How do I prioritize in an emergency situation? Are those scenarios coming up around?
The situation you described is something that we are focusing on. From an email perspective, it's a challenge because it's hard to, we prioritize the network or the individual accessing the network so that they maintain priority. I'd like to give you a quick example, if you're okay with it, with a situational awareness application we utilized at a major music festival, Firefly. I'll go 2 minutes on this, if that's okay? Okay. We work with the state of Delaware as well as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the state of Delaware hosts several NASCAR races and a Firefly Music Festival, which attracts 80,000 people over a several-day period, a 3 or 4 day period. The last 2 years, the Kent County Department of Emergency Services has identified that they've had trouble communicating during such an event. They also communicated that they had very little visibility into where their EMS responders were throughout the event. And even though that they would say, we want you stationed over by stage 2, stage 2 could be a very vague term. Are they the northwest side or are they the east? Whatever it might be. We introduced an application that's certified on the FirstNet network for situational awareness, where the Joint Operations Center had a monitor that they could see where every FirstNet device was in the field. But not just that, the EMS entities and firefighters that were on gators and all-terrain vehicles could look at their device and see where the other EMS entities were. So when they respond to an unconscious victim, one of the things that they would know is EMS 2 might be closer from the map, but EMS 3 and the gator might have the better right-of-way to the person on the who's unconscious. So we noticed that the situational awareness application is starting to change things from cell phone driven of just communicating in voice or maybe an email. We're starting to see these applications are changing the way that.
That's a great. That's really where I was heading toward. Mr. Chairman, just one quick follow-up. As you're seeing this play out, can you talk a little bit about Pennsylvania's investment? At a state level, have we made a commitment to FirstNet and in supporting our Guard emergency operation centers, or even in some of these app development kinds of things?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the National Guard and some work we're doing there, and we are actively having discussions with other agencies, and other agencies have been looking to deploy. So yes, we've got more work to do, but the discussions have been very good, and again, working through Major Stackhouse and State Police.
Is that it? Thank you, Representative. Any other questions from the members? Representative Mako.
I have a quick follow-on question. So you said when somebody comes in, they want to subscribe, and then they have to designate a commander, like I guess a local commander for that unit, for lack of a better term. Once that subscription is purchased, is it only a single device, or can that be? How does that work? Do you have like a code? Is it like a Wi-Fi? I was just thinking about the Wi-Fi here. Do you tap into the frequency, or is each device dedicated then to the network?
good question on the policies that we've laid forth. And I mentioned before, we need to maintain the integrity of the network. A first responder that walks in and can validate their credentials, showcase who they are, can purchase a FirstNet device, a tablet, a smartphone, a feature phone, whatever it might be. Right. And it could be an iPhone or a Samsung device, whatever it might be, their selection. That does not mean that their family is eligible. So perhaps this could help SR6 with creating recruitment with incentives for better cellular service, but ideally, this is not for family plans. This is for first responders. So it's something we take very seriously.
Great, thank you, Representative Mako. One last question, I guess, if no one else has a question. Anyone? Okay. Is there anything we can do to help? I know we're always bringing you before us, tell us what to do, but how do we, this is an important system to our state. We'd like to see it implemented statewide, you know, and be the best that it can be, especially with all the emergency, you know, situations we've had in our state. How do we help you?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, the highlight and the opportunity to talk about this and the committee's interest in that, we thank you for that. You know, we're out there doing our job every day trying to talk about the benefits of FirstNet. As it comes to policy, you know, we talked a little bit about some of the rural issues. I know that's being debated here. I just referenced a short time ago policy issues around the advancement of infrastructure, whether it's you know, small cells or 5G, that type of thing is another issue I would really encourage in the name of public safety, you as members to continue to have a discussion with the whole industry on, not just FirstNet/AT&T. So.
Great, thank you. Representative Gabler.
Thank you very much. And I think we're all trying to wrap our brains around kind of what implementation looks like at the user level as we're thinking about a network at the policymaker level, and then how that translates. So indulge me for just a second. If you've got an entity that wants to do an agency subscription, let's use a volunteer fire department, for example, because I think this is the thing that I'm trying to think through is how this system could be made most useful and most beneficial to something like a volunteer fire department. Would it be standard to say, you know, for an agency subscription, rather than thinking about it as personal devices, getting a series of smartphones and tablets, for example, that might be like one for each truck or one for each unit, and then when they respond, whoever happens to respond picks up that and is using that with whatever apps? Is that typically how a deployment of this service might work at an agency level?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of us are maybe stuck in our mindset a little bit at the personal. We're thinking about what we're carrying on ourselves, but starting to think of these things as a piece of agency equipment or department equipment. Is that typically how we're seeing these things deployed at the user level?
At the agency level.
At the agency
Yes.
level? Yeah.
So, and you touched on a great point. A volunteer fire department now may have a trunk-mounted modem or may have some sort of embedded laptop in the vehicle so they can access the CAD systems from the county dispatch.
Okay.
Most of those, that technology is using cellular infrastructure. So whether it's using a commercial carrier or FirstNet, what we're here to do is provide that priority communication when they are responding or on an everyday basis. So in many fire companies, we're looking at maybe a few officers are paid for by the company for their personal cell phone, but the trunk-mounted modem, the apparatus, how do we connect that apparatus is something that we're focused on.
Thank you very much. Better late than never, but my light bulb just went on. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. And gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be here for us. We greatly appreciate your attendance here. Okay. Our next testifier that I would like to call up is Mr. Jerry Brent, Second Assistant Chief of Patton Fire Company Number 1. And thank you for being here today. And you can begin your testimony when ready. I think we all have a copy of it.
Thank you for the invitation. And I think I can answer a lot of your questions when we're done with the testimony here. Good morning. My name is Jerry Brandt, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Pennsylvania Fire and Emergency Services Institute. The Institute represents fire and emergency services organizations across the Commonwealth. Our mission is to sustain and improve those services critical to the public safety of Pennsylvania. I am also Second Assistant Chief of the Patton Fire Company No. 1 of Patton Borough in Cambria County. We cover 98.9 square miles, have about 7,500 permanent residents of our coverage area. So you gentlemen down at the end there that are talking about rural, come on out and see us. We run about 200 alarms a year currently. And just because we're out there in the middle of nowhere doesn't mean that we don't come across some really demanding situations from time to time. 2 months ago, I celebrated 50 years in the volunteer fire service. And Commissioner, I was glancing around out there at those pictures. I did my SCBA training here in 1972, and I hope there's no evidence of that that's somewhere out there someplace. I held the office of chief at Hope Fire Company in what was then Barnesboro, that's now Northern Cambria, for 15 years. And I am the founder of DeCopeland Associates, LLC, which is a firm focusing on planning, consulting, and grant writing for emergency services agencies and municipal government. My business takes me across the country interacting with the emergency service providers. When I first joined the fire service in 1969, if someone had an emergency, it was not uncommon for them to find 2 or 3 different phone numbers in the phone directory to call. One was usually the fire chief's house, one might be the funeral director in town, and the other a business that was close to the fire station. Someone answering the phone at one of these stations would be responsible for turning on the siren at the fire station and writing the location of the incident on a large chalkboard. Today, technology gives us the opportunity to provide our first responders with instant information from the second they are dispatched. Firefighters can receive text message that they have an alarm, which will then bring up a map and directions to location of the call. It may also allow them to access where the closest water source is and what other units are responding. The information may also include any hazards that are present on the site. Of course, all of this is predicated on the fact that you can get the message and access that wonderful information. From the moment of dispatch, first responders are at a disadvantage if they are not connected. When an EMS unit responds to a suspected cardiac incident, their personnel immediately attach a monitor to the patient. The monitor sends vital signs to a local doctor, emergency department, and/or patient's cardiologist. Quickly, that doctor can inform the crew if the patient is in fact having a heart attack. The doctor can tell the crew about pre-hospital treatment for the patient, and the doctor can inform hospital personnel what preparations are needed for the soon arriving patient. Again, all of this is possible only if this incident occurred in an area that has connectivity. Every day there are positive outcomes to life-threatening situations like this because of access to telecommunications. Every day individuals are also dying needlessly because their incident happened in a zip code that isn't connected. Recent studies indicate that approximately 95% of the land area and about half the population of our state lacks proper connectivity. One solution for this situation is FirstNet. FirstNet is in the early stages of creating the first nationwide high-speed broadband wireless network, providing a single interoperable platform for law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, and other public safety agencies. This is going to revolutionize the communications technology for first responders. The legislature needs to support the efforts of FirstNet to connect first responders across the state of Pennsylvania with each other and with the technology that can provide effective life-saving information at a moment's notice. I am a FirstNet subscriber. I have been since last fall. You're welcome. Your people were out last fall and talked to us. This is a FirstNet device. It's I believe this is the Samsung 8 version or whatever it is. But The one thing that our department didn't go in as a department, but we designated our chief as that point of contact. And individual members of the department were able to get on to FirstNet. It cut my phone bill in half. If you want to talk about a good incentive, we go out to the high school on career day every year. And certainly this year, one of the things that's going to be mentioned to those teenagers, all of who have cell phones, is you can cut your cell phone bill in half if you come join the fire company. It's a great incentive tool. We haven't subscribed as a department for a couple of reasons. Number one, there are still dead spots in our area. And number two, unfortunately, as is happening a lot across Pennsylvania, our neighboring fire department came to us about 2 months ago and said, would you please consider merging? We just don't have the personnel anymore. And so we're kind of in a flux situation right now. But once that is over, we had looked at the idea of putting iPhones in all of our apparatus and using that to access information. There's just a wealth of information that's available out there if you're connected. Anybody, any questions?
Yes, Jerry, you'd said earlier that when you began your testimony, there were a whole bunch of answers you had for us for some of the questions. Can you go through any of them, or instead of us having to re-ask the questions again?
Well, I think there was some confusion about how somebody can become part of the FirstNet system, the FirstNet services. When I go to sign up, or when someone else would go to sign up, that point of contact, which is my chief, will get an email saying, is Jerry Brandt in fact a member of the Patent Fire Company #1? He's got to tell them yes. So then that gives me access to become a FirstNet subscriber. I can tell you that I was out at FDIC in Indianapolis, which is the largest trade show for fire and EMS in the world. They get about 38,000 people there. And the opening is a very poignant ceremony with pipes and drums, etc. And of course, everybody is shooting this on their phone and trying to send it. Those of us with FirstNet, we could send it. There are a lot of people there going, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? So the system works, by the way, in case you didn't know. So, I mean, does that make it a little bit clearer as to how this?
Yes. Members, questions from the members? Anybody? Representative Webster, go ahead.
I'm just joking about cutting my phone bill in half. So, Mr. Chairman, could we make it that members were eligible, to respond and join FirstNet? I was thinking that would be a benefit for.
And
yeah.
And it's provided me with a great opportunity, because I'm literally out there in the middle of nowhere. My old provider at my house, my speed was 0.6. At sometimes it would get up to 1 megabyte. And as part of my subscription, I've got a hotspot with this. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's all for $52 a month.
Works for me. Okay.
And I mean, the service, the service is there. It's great. There are still spots that, we understand that they need to seriously take a look at as far as building out the system.
They use their grant money that we give them towards this. Okay. Okay. Is there any way we can help to make this more affordable to firefighters and to our firehouses? I mean, if the county's opt in and the fire station opts in, does it do anything to make it more affordable. I think if that was the big stumbling block here, since this is shown to be effective in your area.
I mean, it's really not the affordability that's an issue. We would be on board right now as a department completely if some of those dead spots were taken care of. Those guys are the only ones that can do that. And as I said, the department that has merging into us is going to put another 50 square miles onto our coverage area, and they've got a lot more dead spots.
Any questions, Representative?
Thank you. I think this is maybe a follow-up question maybe for the previous guys, but is there, based on what your company does, there's no fire department subscription, but your department has to opt into some or sign up somehow, or you just go in and decide you're gonna, as the chief, you're gonna sign up as the first, if with this service, and then kind of open it up to the rest of the fire company, or?
Actually, FirstNet was great. They came out to our station. They brought devices with them for people that wanted to not only get onto the service, but also maybe purchase a new device. They signed us up on site at the station. My grandson, who's also a firefighter with our department, he was away at work, and so a couple weeks later, when he went to the store to sign up, all he had to do was ahead of time let the chief know. The chief sent FirstNet a message, and that he was coming in, and verified who he was.
Maybe this hypothetical will help. A lot of the fire companies back home are, or I will say seasoned firefighters that maybe even resist, cell phones, let alone, they like their pagers and things. Could a member within the fire department that, sees the advantage of this, where the leadership or some of the older members don't sign up for this without the fire company buying in? Let's just say I'm volunteer fire company, XYZ fire department. My company doesn't want to use it, but I think it'd be valuable to me as a firefighter. Is that individual firefighter able to sign up for that?
That's
probably for these
question
guys.
For these
but,
guys,
yeah.
that I don't know.
We do not need the agency to have an agreement in place. Individuals can take advantage of FirstNet, purchase it separate. They simply need to validate their credentials in order to do so.
Is there a benefit for the agency to subscribe to the members in any way?
From a collaboration standpoint, yes. The agency would be able to acknowledge who is on their list, and there's elements built into our system where we can uplift the priority level depending on an incident. So this is going down a whole nother complex strategy.
Okay, yeah.
But from a NIMS response, we had to look at ways to provide priority status of your mutual aid organizations in the future. And this is one of the protocols that we built into the framework. The agency identifying the members as eligible makes it a lot easier for us to identify an individual firefighter with company XYZ, as you had mentioned. So they are all ultimately grouped together. If they're deployed, you can uplift the whole organization as a whole in a specific response.
Okay, Representative Ecker, still? Okay, Representative Gillen, my favorite deplorable.
We're kind of coming to the end of the line here relative to questions, so if I could just move to a parallel silo. You're 50 years in firefighting. It's commendable. Maybe we can learn something from you here in a couple minutes relative to retention, volunteerism. I think your particular firefighting outfit's over 100-year tradition. It's been around a long time.
It's 123 years old.
All right. Your grandson is now coming up through the ranks. What can we learn from you? You've been at it a long time, and you've got a fire fighting outfit that's been around a long time. How do we retain that in the Commonwealth?
I still train. Last month, I took a course in educational methodology that was offered through Bucks County Community College. And the instructor that we had for that course, day one, said, "Does anybody know why the dinosaurs aren't here anymore?" And some people said, "Well, you know, an asteroid hit the Earth or the Ice Age or whatever." And he said, no. He went through this every day for the 5 days he was there. And finally, on the 5th day, he said, "You know why the dinosaurs aren't here?" And everybody said, "We give up." He said, "They didn't adapt." He said, "Had they adapted to the Ice Age, they'd still be here. Had they adapted to the meteor hitting the Earth, they would still be here." He said, "If the volunteer fire service doesn't adapt, it's not going to be here." And that's what we need to do. We need, us older members, our job is to ensure that there are younger members. And, you know, we need to change our ways a little bit. This generation, as all generations, is different than the ones that came before it. And we need to look at those differences, and we need to welcome them into the fire service.
Okay. Jerry, thank you for your comments today and being here today, taking time to be with us.
All right, anytime.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, I think that's all the testimony we have for the day. I want to thank all the panelists for their expert insight on this important emergency responder communication system. As a former radioman in the Navy, I know how important communications is to a mission, and I think we can all be proud of what is transpiring across the Commonwealth today. Chairman Sonato, any comments?
I'd too like to thank our testifiers. I think we learned a lot today, and as this process continues, and I look forward to continue our relationship of working with you to make it best for the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a short restroom break, and then whoever wants to stay for a tour is welcome to. Thank you.